Good morning. I'm Christy Ferrantella, the President and CEO of the Nantucket Chamber of Commerce. Today, I'm joined by Amy Baxter, the Licensing Administrator for the town of Nantucket, and we're here to talk about Phase 2 of Massachusetts' reopening plan. Amy and I are live today specifically to answer questions about the Phase 2 reopening guidelines. If you have a question, you can submit it through the chat box on YouTube. If you don't see this, try refreshing your page. To summarize, on May 18th, Governor Baker announced the four-part reopening plan for the state. On May 18th, Phase 1 began, allowing manufacturing, construction, and places of worship to open. Throughout Phase 1, additional industries and sectors were allowed to operate and begin opening in a limited capacity, such as curbside retail, fishing charters, beaches, pet grooming, and salons. When the governor announced the plan, he announced that there'd be at least 3 weeks in between phases. Yesterday, he confirmed that the public data from COVID-19 is trending in the right direction and that the state is ready to move into Phase 2 tomorrow, June 8th. In Phase 2, accommodations will open, retail will be open for limited customers, and restaurants can begin with outdoor dining. Within Phase 2, there'll be several, quote, steps as we move through the phase. For example, personal training and close contact services such as massages will open in Step 2 within Phase 2. Currently, there's no date for this, while retail, restaurants, and lodging will be in Step 1. Childcare is also allowed to open in Phase 2, and guidelines and recommendations set by the EEC. Summer camps, community pools, playgrounds, and non-athletic classes will also open in Phase 2, again under guidelines from the state. I'm going to turn it over to see if there are any questions from the feed.
Don't see any yet. Would you like me to start with some restaurant information? So my name is Amy Baxter, and I'm the licensing administrator with the town, and we manage a lot of the licensing, liquor licensing and food licensing, and have been working with the restaurants through these phases. As Christy mentioned, the governor did announce Phase 2 to begin on Monday. A lot of that focus for us has been helping the restaurants understanding outdoor space. And it's been very difficult trying to figure out, this is all new, what outdoor space is. It isn't as straightforward as we would think sometimes. We've done a lot of things over the years to make things pretty and things of that sort, and sometimes that's looked at as an obstruction as far as this. So when we're talking about outdoor space, the state and health is really looking at airflow. So we've discussed a lot of times with the restaurant when we look at the orders that were put out saying 50% of the perimeter needs to be unobstructed and remain open. So we're discussing airflow. So you have a lot of different options out there. You have those that are on the beach, a sandbar, the galley, and those folks that have outdoor space. That's absolutely open. We don't have any question about that definition. And then we go into spaces that have flaps and things like that. They might have a covering. So, during this first step of the phase, what the state and health is really looking at is creating airflow. So those folks that have window coverings, maybe Sea Grill or Slip 14 has flaps, that they're open, that airflow is allowed to kind of go through. So that's kind of what our focus has been, is helping folks kind of understand that, how it's going to look for them. So those are going to be the first two areas that really start to open up. Again, they're looking at the 6 feet between people, so between tables, but between, you sitting 6 feet at least away from a next person. No more than 6 people per reservation per table at this point. So that has been that limit that has been put down as well. We talk about reservations required, but basically either a call ahead or the intent with that part of the order is to not congregate in small spaces, to not create groups and things of that sort. So either an appropriately spaced line or have someone come back or call ahead. So just want to get that out, that it's not the hard, you need to call 2 weeks before to get your table situation. So those are the kind of things on top of the health protocols. They're all getting ready to open. We have an internal work group together that we've been working through other ideas, because aside from the restaurants that you can clearly see have outdoor space. How can we help those that don't expand into different areas? The first level of that, we're seeing some folks looking into their areas and parking areas, setting up some tables outside in parking areas. And our part, we're just making sure that there's enough of a barrier, that there's no sense of traffic or anything coming close to folks. So that's one area we want to look at, but on their property, that's great. Hopefully we're moving those along. We have several that are going to be doing that, that have large parking areas. The town has relieved a lot of different hurdles that are normally in place with zoning and parking, things of that sort. The state has also worked on allowing us locally to help folks as far as, obviously liquor licensing is very strict and has quite a process involved, and they've alleviated a lot of that. We still need to document it, but they've helped us do it at a local level. So that has been great.
And that's a big question that restaurants have been asking is, right now with curbside, they're allowed to sell beer and wine. And if they decide to open up, will they still be able to sell curbside beer and wine?
Correct. That's a big question. And yes, we have not seen, they would have to rescind that order. And my expectation is that both will be allowed to happen for as long as this emergency order is in place, and that they're restricted in some way. As you know, restaurants, I mean, even at 75% capacity would be struggling. So I think they're looking to do both those options because they are taking away from their business to so much that we need to kind of do both. So that is continuing the pickup and delivery. Right now it's beer and wine, a limited amount. They have specific amounts they're allowed to sell in original sealed containers. There is a bill floating around about liquor and cocktails in sealed containers. That hasn't been approved yet. It's still kind of in the phases, but if that comes down, we'll certainly allow for that as the state guidelines. But as of right now, we believe both are going to continue. So that if there's not space at a restaurant you like, or if you're not yet comfortable in that situation, the pickup of food and beverages is still going to be allowed. And that's something we're thinking about in these plannings. So after the other thing, the point I wanted to make, that we are looking at still going to be through this week as far as sidewalk spaces and public spaces. That takes a little bit longer. There's a lot of life safety issues, traffic flow, ADA requirements, making sure things are accessible. So those parts and different owners take a little bit longer, but the first part, can easily start this week as we go through this week, and we hope to kind of iron out the other things as well.
That's great. That's one of our questions that came in from Melissa, is asking, are there plans to close streets or redirect traffic to create some public seating or outdoor seating opportunities for restaurants that don't have any?
That is a consideration. And again, I don't want to say too much because, it needs to be worked out. It needs to be worked out, like I said, on different levels, on accessibility, on, making sure that traffic and any sort of vehicle traffic will be kept away from folks. People think of Jersey barriers, but nothing that can impede also emergency vehicle access, things of that sort. The accessibility part will be in play in a lot of places with cobblestones and things like that. If it's not accessible, the sidewalks need to remain accessible for a wheelchair, that sort of thing. So those are the considerations, and that's why that takes a little bit, is absolutely under consideration. And I hope we'll move through that this week and understand what we can do. Some streets, like the truck route and things like that, have to remain open to some extent, so they can't be a complete closure. And possibility of special closures at different times. Wouldn't it be a permanent closure, but how can we look at that? So that absolutely is what we're all working on. I just don't want to give too many details. We want to try to be as fair as possible, but I think the restaurant industry has been very gracious in that, and saying, sometimes a road closure will only benefit a couple, but we're okay with that. Help who you can help. They've been great with that. So we're working on that. Yes.
Yeah, and that's been another big question, is how to open up fairly and also how to open up safely. I know a lot of towns across the Cape are also looking at this and looking at, okay, can I close down half the street so an ambulance can still get through, or take a little bit close to the sidewalk on either side, but still have the main kind of road open so that instead of 2 lanes, it's just one. So there's definitely a lot of people thinking creatively, and hopefully the town of Nantucket will too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we're looking at those other towns that are doing it, and we're set up so differently. So it's hard if they say, well, that town does it. And it's like, well, it's a little different. And, again, sometimes a street closure will help some, but again, some retailers may be like, hey, how are my customers getting? So it's trying to find as much of a balance. It won't be 100% fair, but as much as we can do in little spots, absolutely. We'll continue that conversation as we go.
So another question we just got is, what rules apply across the board to all lodging, restaurants, and stores? And I'm happy to start this one. Most of it is kind of everything we've heard about COVID, making sure people are wearing masks, making sure that you have the 6 feet social distancing, doing a layout of your floor plan so that you're trying to prevent bottlenecks. So if it's possible to have 1 entry and 1 exit, I know a lot of stores on Nantucket, that's not a possibility. So being able to enter your store, maybe walk around and then exit, but having arrows on the floor. Definitely, if you can put some 6 feet social distance marketing markers. So if you have a line going out your door, we've suggested putting chalk on the sidewalk, or little stickers that I know Poets Corner is printing. And then obviously the safety protocols. So everybody needs to maintain a cleaning log of when things were cleaned, what was the protocol. Restaurants and lodging also need to keep a list of who is dining. So if there's any contact tracing, keeping list of reservations for both of those. And obviously having as much hand sanitizer and wipes and things like that available to people to disinfect, as I would say that's generally what is across the board rules. The state mass.gov/reopening has individual protocols by industry. So if you want to look specifically for restaurants or specifically for retail or pet grooming or nail salons, all of that is going to be on that website.
And I'll point out that that was very comprehensive. I think you covered most things, I would say, too. The town has, and I understand the state website and some of that information is confusing. Where do I go? The town has put together a back to business toolkit that's on our website, nantucket-ma.gov. That we are trying to take all this down and provide quick links to it within that document, and information too as well, to help people kind of find it, because it's a little confusing. So I would suggest everyone go to that. As soon as something comes out, Florence puts in a link and puts in that information to help you kind of understand it. And like Christy said, we're trying to provide as much guidance as possible, and then each business really taking that and understanding how their business works and what's going to work for them. Yeah, I think is the best advice there.
Definitely. Another question we just got is, do chefs need to stay 6 feet apart from each other, or is it just recommended?
Yeah, that's, and again, I think it's recommended, and it's going to be, again, they're going to put the guidance out, and using your best judgment. And how you do that. And I know it's tough with masks and staff with masks, and certain chefs are working over open flames and things of that sort. So, they know how to keep clean and wash their hands and keep people safe. They do this every day, even before pandemics. So I feel these people are used to keeping people safe. That's their job. So I will leave that to them to do what's best.
Definitely. And that's across the board. Is if you can't maintain 6 feet, it's always recommended to have a mask on to keep everybody safe.
Correct.
And I know another big question in retail is how many people are allowed in your store, or what are the capacity limits? Do you want to go over that a little bit, Amy?
Yeah, and that, let me see if I have that right in front of me. The state put out formulas, and we discussed it with the retail group last week, and our building commissioner was kind enough to join and kind of go through that. I think it is, they do it based on 1 per, was it 1,000 square foot? They were doing it by square foot. information, and that doesn't necessarily apply to a lot of our stores are so small. So again, it is how you can best keep 6 foot distance, keep that flow. I think of some places you go this way, that way, that way, but we're gonna have to start getting used to, like we do at the Stop and Shop, the flow, and people using their best judgment. As far as if there's too many folks in, people I think all over, luckily, this is not luckily, but this is happening everywhere, so folks coming in are doing this in their own hometowns too as well. So that's why we discuss chalking outside. The juice bar has been doing that for their line as well, and working with your neighbors and the neighboring stores too as well. But again, that's going to be best judgment as far as how many people are in that space. But it's the 6 foot distancing really, and the masks are very important.
And one of the things that I forgot to mention in that back to business um, file that the town put together, there is a sign for masks that can have a universal sign across the town. So you can download that. Poets Corner's printing it and others as well. But that way, if everybody sees the same sign before they enter a store or a restaurant or a lodging establishment, they're starting to see and understand kind of the communication across the island. And then just to follow up on the retail, the equation is 8 people per 1,000 square feet, or 40% of your permitted occupancy. So it just depends if you're a newer or older store and you have that permitted occupancy. Otherwise, you use the 8 persons per 1,000 square feet.
Right, thank you. I'm going to answer another question that I see here from Kim. Hi, Kim, and I probably owe you all an email. Thanks for doing this. Any word on catered beach gatherings if all guidelines are being followed for outdoor seating? So on the beach, there are some beach guidelines that have been put together and put out, obviously asking for the spacing. I think it's 12 foot between folks sitting on the beach and that sort of situation. I think as far as beach gatherings and caterings, we're still in a 10 person gathering limit. That has not gone out. We're not looking to permit too much commercial activity on beaches, things of that sort, because 10 includes staff and people. I think at this point, and my family's done this, we've gotten catering and it's delivered to us in the parking lot, and we take it out and have that dinner on the beach. So I think we're going to have to stick with that right now. We need to keep as much open space out there as possible. People aren't going to have restaurants to go to. They're going to need more space to spread out. We don't want to have to close down a beach because it's getting too crowded. So I'm just going to say right now, we're just looking to keep the beaches as open as possible. We're not yet going to be doing special event or catering permits for public beaches. They have to really just remain, like I said, as open as possible. We would just ask if any people are going to have small gatherings, obviously under 10, that are catered. It'd be private property right now. I just think we just need to commit to that right now and just see how this goes. And again, it's week by week as we see how things go, how many people are coming, how much space we have. But for right now, I think until they allow public gatherings larger, maybe 25 or more, I don't think we're going to get into that space just yet. We need to help create space and help those businesses, have people have a place to go. So that's my answer right now.
And I know a lot of people have been asking about the wedding season on Nantucket, a lot of calls to the chamber. And right now, under the governor's orders, lodging is not allowed to hold a large event or a wedding, and also function halls or restaurants. So if you were trying to do something small, right now that's not allowed.
Right. And I know a big question too on events, the tents. There's a couple things going on with the tents. I know the 30-day rule with the commercial tents and folks like, some of the inns or other places that are putting tents up for restaurant activity. That's going to be allowed a little bit longer. I think what's still being worked on is the limit on private properties. I know a lot of weddings want to switch to next year, and that's going to bunch up, tents and would go against the otherwise limited restrictions. So I know they're actively working through that and how that works. But yes, right now we're still on, it's like I said, 10 person. So until then, we can't do that. We're not going to permit anything of that sort just yet.
Thank you. So the next question is, why can retail and hotels allow patrons inside, but restaurants cannot.
Yeah, we had this discussion the other day, and I think a lot of times it's interpretation of some of these guidelines. I don't think they should be able to have indoor seating on that. So that's a discussion, and I'm not sure where that's gone. They're allowed to have folks come in, obviously check in, go to their rooms, but I don't believe there's allowed gatherings. Certain hotels have, Nantucket Hotel has an ability on their porch there to open up those sides and create that airflow that we discussed, and it's open seating. So that would be appropriate. But not interior in the restaurant. That would certainly not be fair and not be appropriate. So I think it's just coming in, and they have a whole sort of guidelines they have to follow as far as people staying in their hotel. But it's that close contact in enclosed spaces for a long period of time, not just a check-in and going to a room. In the restaurant, you're spending 2 hours near someone. So that right now, and I'll just jump on that as well. The governor, from what I understood, may actually give us a heads up this week on step 2, so we can prepare a little bit more for interior dining. That's supposed to come in this phase sometime, I would hope sometime in the month of June. So I would say look in the next week. He said in the next 3 or 4 days, we're going to give you some guidelines. So
That's great.
yes.
And that's another thing I forgot to mention in kind of the guidelines across industries is everything is trying to promote, the airflow. So try to keep your doors open, your windows open. And so that's going to apply to retail, to hotels, and also to restaurants and even, office buildings, everything.
Yeah, and I'll say, and I'll talk to the restaurants too about this, but some of those places that do have the flaps and everything else that have to come down in bad weather, just understand that there may be times before we get to the next phase that if it's really bad and they have to close it down, they won't be able to serve if everything is down. So I just, that's not their fault. That's just going to be the way it is during this first step.
So we're really hoping for a sunny June.
Yes. Yeah. Good luck. Yeah.
So I know another question that has been asked a lot, visitors calling the island, is do I have to self-quarantine? So just to answer that question in the guidelines, when people call the lodging establishments or short-term rentals, it is suggested that you notify people coming from out of state that they should self-quarantine for 14 days, but it is not a requirement. So there's no minimum stay on the island. Everybody is welcome to come from in-state or out of state. Just that guideline that it is a recommendation. And what we keep saying over and over again, select board meetings, chamber discussions, is join in our success. We wear masks, we social distance, we have had a very low case of COVID on the island, so help us maintain that.
Yep. Anything else?
When do you think events will be able to take place inside this summer?
Oh, that's again, we've talked about this crystal ball thing. Unfortunately, it's not a situation where we're creating some regulations here. I can't guarantee, again, as we look at it, if restaurants start to be able to serve inside, again, I think it's going to be at 25% reduced occupancy. So at that point, when that starts to happen, 25 or 50% occupancy, I suppose you can have indoor type of things, but I'm going to tell you, it's going to be at tables. There's going to be one thing with events that happens, no buffets. I don't think buffet or self-service type of food is coming back right away. Standing around at a bar, and bar scene type of thing is not coming back quickly. Unless things change dramatically. I think those are the things we have to understand are going to be a while out, that it's just going to be a different look. Once we are able to go inside and have those guidelines and have more people in a room, or if it's an event, obviously, and we can have interior dining. If your event is, more than 6 people at a table and they can be at tables and who's coming and they've got space, then that can happen. But the mixing, the dancing, all of that, it's just going to depend on the type of event you want. So we'll watch how these come down and these guidelines, and those types of things can happen once we're able to do that indoors, and even now outdoors, as long as it's at the tables and the prescribed guidelines. So as far as a date, again, we want to be good right now so that we don't go into any other sort of lockdown or have any other sort of spike. So
Right.
it's going to be a slow go for a bit.
And just reading the governor's guidelines, parades and big events like that are currently scheduled for phase 4. So we are putting 3 weeks in between each phase. So phase 3 would probably start at the end of June, with phase 4 starting at the end of July. So that kind of might be the earliest time that we could have larger gatherings. Again, the governor doesn't like to set dates. It's all based on public data. He, even on Friday, wouldn't give any indication if he was going to announce Saturday if phase 2 was ready to start Monday. It's very difficult to set a date, but that's our hope, is that by the end of July there might be some more larger events.
Right. And Kim again is asking about private gatherings at homes. Yeah, being catered outdoors where there's good airflow. Yes. Again, some people have been advertising, catering for large events, at home. We need to just keep to the 10 right now, and hopefully that'll go up as we come out of this a little bit more. So it's just sticking to that, really. Because as you know, you don't want to become the source of any sort of outbreak or infection. So I would say just stick to those guidelines outside. Yeah, if families having 5, 6, 7 people, whatever, and the cater staff too as well, and you keep within that. Yeah, that's great.
And I would just add to follow the guidelines that are put out by the restaurants. I know they don't currently have guidelines for catering, but things like single-use everything. I know Nantucket has been trying to get rid of single-use plastics. So, if you could use other things like bamboo, of course, we would prefer that. But menus right now for restaurants have to be either paper or on a chalkboard. So kind of that would go with catering, try to do single-use menus on the table. And then, no serving, self-serving. So everything would have to be plated, and anything like salt and pepper shakers, you want to wipe down after use, and having kind of individual uses as much as possible. So restaurants have to bring them over to a table, clean them after. So that'd be the same kind of with catering. All right, well, we aren't seeing any other questions. So in closing, I just wanted to remind everybody that phase 2 will begin tomorrow on June 8th, which will allow for additional industries such as retail, outdoor dining, and accommodations to reopen. As a reminder, all businesses that are reopened or who have already reopened must follow the mandatory safety standards for workplaces. They must have a COVID-19 control plan and a compliance attestation poster. There's both employer and worker posters explaining the mandatory safety requirements, which should be posted in your workspace. And all of this information can be found at mass.gov/reopening or the town's Back to Business resource. We've worked really hard to fight the virus, and as we move into reopening our economy, it's important that we all do our part in keeping our community safe and our businesses open. Thank you so much to Amy for joining us today and answering questions, and we look forward to doing this again when we enter phase 3.
Great. Thank you so much for having me, and everyone, know where to find me to reach out for any other questions.